In today's episode, I'm joined by Charlotte Van Leeuwen, who founded Bord&Stift in the Netherlands, an agency for visual communication which transformed into a self-managing, steward-owned organisation. Charlotte now works at energized.org, where she enjoys sharing her experiences in self-organisation with other entrepreneurs. Charlotte's energy and passion for self organization is palpable in our conversation. In fact, this podcast chat was one of those conversations where I walked away feeling absolutely high on life because Charlotte just brings this fizz of energy and positivity that immediately makes you feel good. Together, we dive into her journey from physics and astronomy to entrepreneurship, the discovery of self organization, and the trials and challenges of evolving into a self-managing entity. So let's get started. Hi, Charlotte, and welcome to Make It Thrive.
Hi, Lizzie. Very happy to be here with you.
Oh, I've been very much looking forward to this conversation. And I feel like we should start off by talking about your founder journey, if you're happy to share that.
Yes, definitely. Actually, I've been one of those students who were very happy in the education system. I really liked getting the good grades, and I really liked that the path was clear and set for you. So after my high school, I decided to study physics. And then during my physics study, I had one really weird module where it was not about physics, but it was about life. It was from a crazy teacher, where we had to do all kind of strange assignments, like we had to write our own obituary at a graveyard and thinking about what we want to do in life, and many more strange assignments. But that really made me realize, like, okay, there's a path set out for me by the education system. And then there's also this kind of other option where I can more create my own path. And that was a really kind of interesting new path for me, because for me it was so logical to be in the path that was set for me. And then during my studies, actually, I had the opportunity to start a company with a friend. I was then inspired. I also studied in Singapore, and there you have all these kind of food courts with local entrepreneurs who serve the food. Then I was really inspired by that. And in Holland, we only had very bad, boring canteens with not so nice food. And then with that friend back in Holland, we decided to give it a try and start a company based partly on this experience with this module, where it was about, hey, maybe you can create kind of your own world. Yeah, and that really went off surprisingly, because I think we made all the mistakes beginning entrepreneurs can make. In the beginning, we didn't even know what VAT was, so we didn't put any VAT on our invoices. And because we're like, what's this thing with the percentage? Oh, let's put 0. We don't understand it. Like, many more mistakes. But I think also as an entrepreneur, sometimes by not knowing how complex the world is, you dare to take a step. And that was kind of, I would say, the normal founder story, where you start a company and it's such a grow, and at some point it grows in such a way that you don't feel at home anymore as an entrepreneur. I heard that from many other entrepreneurs, and I decided to step out and then start something new. And the second company I started was called Bord&Stift. And we made videos to explain complex things in an easy way for all kind of organizations. And then I already had like kind of a feeling, with this company, I already did it with one company, quite standard. Let's research if with this company I can do it a little bit differently. And that's where I came on the path of self-organization and thinking, oh, how can I run my company still in an efficient and successful way, but not with a standard management hierarchy, which also comes with a lot of issues.
Yeah, absolutely. And how many people were you when you kind of discovered this like new way of working? Were you growing? Were you kind of still in that startup phase? What kind of
Yes, I think
layer were you?
it was when we were below 10, 11 people, then still everything went kind of by itself. I was really this enthusiastic, little chaotic entrepreneur being out in the world, but somehow everything always fell into place by being at the lunch table together. But when we start to grow, becoming 10, 11, 12 people, then things didn't work anymore by just handling it with each other over lunch. So then I also became more interested in researching, hey, probably we need some structure. I know I don't want the management hierarchy because I've seen in a lot of other organizations also the trouble that comes with it. I also see the advantages, but I was on a quest for, hey, can there be something more? And at that time, so when we were with 11, 12 people, then I heard a talk of another entrepreneur in the Netherlands who made his company fully self-organized. And he told a very funny story. I also keep on retelling because I think it's a good story. So he was also an entrepreneur who never worked anywhere else. He also started his company out of his study. And then his company started growing, and he was like, okay, so now I'm growing. Now I need managers. I don't know anything about managers, but let's solve this thing how I solve everything. I will go to my friends and I will ask them, hey, do you have any good managers? How is this? And then he said his friends replied 9 out of 10 times. They said, no, actually, I don't really have a good manager. So he was like, okay, whoa. So first thing is really hard to find good managers. And then 1 out of his 10 friends said, yes, I have a very good manager. And then he was like, okay, so tell me, what does this manager do? How can I find these kind of people? And then the people would say, yeah, well, he really lets me do my own thing. And then he was like, okay, so it's very hard to find good managers. Only 1 out of 10 of my friends says they have a good manager. And then a good manager is somebody who's really able to let people do their own thing, to let people fly. So wouldn't it be wiser to find a structure that enables a structure that does the management instead of depending it on people? And I think that's really the power of self-organization. A lot of people have the misconception that self-organization is then without structure and just chaos. But I think it's actually more structure than sometimes in management hierarchy is, but a really clear structure, not dependent on people. And he also always shares that he's very compassionate for managers because they do have to have so many skills in one person. You have to be good on the human side, good on the number side. You have to connect with the layer above you, with the layer below you. It's almost impossible to find this in one person. And what self-organization says is, okay, let's try to distribute the skills of the manager among the people because management is still needed. Yeah, and let's then find out how this can work. So that
Oh,
talk really inspired me of for us also finding a new way of working.
yeah. So many people, I'm just thinking when I've done talks and things, and in my head, I'm hearing all of the people who are so skeptical. So, when this entrepreneur is sharing this story, was there any kind of skepticism in you, or were you like, this makes perfect sense?
Actually, I felt like what he was saying, yeah, I was not that skeptical of what he was saying because I thought it sounded very logical, because especially this thing of we ask so much from managers. It's almost impossible to find it in one person. It's not saying managers are bad people, but I think that's kind of close to reality. So in my feeling, he was describing the reality more than living in this dream where when you hire the perfect manager, then the whole company will be all right. And also from an almost physical mathematical perspective, I think it's very weak if your company is really dependent on finding every time that perfect manager who will control everything and will make sure everything is right. I think it's much mathematically almost smarter to distribute it among the people. So yeah, that's why I was quite convinced, hey, this sounds more logical than actually the story of the traditional management hierarchy. And what I like in my way of thinking, like first I thought, so you have management hierarchy, and then we can put something kind of contrary to that. And more I keep on thinking like self-organization is just the next step in management hierarchy. It's just the evolved form. You still use the wisdom that comes from management hierarchy, like, okay, it's good to get really much clarity and it's good to get clear on goals, but you use it in a kind of more advanced, better way, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, we always have this kind of word, or the way we describe it is like shared control. It's like so often the control and the health of your organization is just kind of linchpinned on those few individuals in that management hierarchy, and everything's there, everything's kind of bottlenecked with them. But actually, when we decentralize things, it's shared control. So the structure and the system helps to keep those boundaries together, rather than, like I say, those linchpins. And that's the kind of the difference. And I love that you've hit there about, actually, it's more structured, but also it's more intentional, I think, around the structure that you're creating as well.
What more intentional? Yes, exactly. It's really serving the purpose. Often you can really save your energy for putting in serving the purpose of the organization, instead of being busy with these kind of political games, or getting a new status, just doing, getting into the job of manager because it's the promotion you want. So I think there's a lot of illogical things in how companies are actually standardly structured, and that really irritates me, because I like it when, I think that's my physics background, I like it when things are logical and actually make
Yeah.
sense. So yeah, sometimes, because I don't know, maybe because I'm a woman, but sometimes people also think it's this kind of soft thing that it's just nice to do this way of self-organization, and then I always get a bit irritated, because I'm like, no, it's just the more logical, efficient way of organizing. It's also more human, I agree, but uh it's also more efficient. And
Yeah.
I think indeed it's very sad that for many entrepreneurs it's not even a conscious decision to choose for the management
Yeah.
hierarchy. It's just the only option. They know everyone around them is doing it, so it seems like the only logical way to keep on growing your company. And I think it's just, people can still choose that, but I think it's nice if it's a conscious choice and not just a choice by default.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh, so much so. And I think that's the challenge, is trying to bring out an awareness that there's other ways that we can organize. We don't have to keep choosing this, standardized way that's existed for hundreds of years now. We can actually start to be, really mindful and conscious of, actually, the way we're going to operate is going to really align with our purpose, what we want to achieve. And it's going to be less about managing people and actually enabling us to perform better and actually achieve what we're here to do.
Yes. And maybe one thing I can add, because you asked the question of skepticism, and what I found really interesting, that already in the 60s there was this research among managers, actually, where they wanted to find out which strategy of managing would work the best. And they defined there were kind of two types of managers, managers X and managers Y. And managers X would be really this controlling. They would believe people need to be motivated by sticks and carrots, and people couldn't be trusted, and people had no internal kind of passion to work. That was kind of one group of managers called X. They believed in that framework. And then they also defined there's another group of managers, managers type Y, who believe people are internally motivated. If they don't do well, it's not because they are evil, but because something's probably in the way for them to be their best selves, and that they are internally motivated. And then they did this research where they want to find out which of the two strategies was right. And they found a really interesting conclusions, because they found that both strategies were right. Because actually the managers that would apply the type X type of managing, the controlling, the people in these groups would actually also start behaving just as the managers described. Like, you see, they're not internally motivated. See, I need to motivate them. And for the managers type Y, the same was true. They would see, my people, they're really internally motivated. See, I can really trust them. And I think that's what the hard part is. And I also shifted more and more towards, when I talk to entrepreneurs, saying, honestly, for yourself, what type of image do you have of your employees, of your colleagues? If you really believe in this kind of controlling part, I don't think the self-organization will work, because, yeah, it will keep on reinforcing itself. So that's why I think there's also this kind of inner work component, where somehow you need to get in tune with kind of feeling that you yourself are a good human being in a way, and that your fellow humans are also good beings, sometimes behaving badly more due to circumstances than to inherent evilness. So I think that part is important in, yeah, why I can understand some people are maybe skeptical if they have applied this controlling method and indeed seen all the data that indeed people are behaving not motivated.
Yeah, it's that self-fulfilling prophecy, right? The way you, the belief that you have, it just then ends up actually giving you that feedback right back. So it's the self-fulfilling prophecy of however you are as a leader, your belief system, your mindset is going to manifest in how the team develops anyway. So I'm so glad you brought up that, you know, that need to do the inner, the deeper work, because I'll never forget years ago when I used to work internally, I was labeled as Wendy to the Lost Boys. Because I was like this overly caring parent and I just looked after everybody and I wanted everyone to have a good time. And that just manifested itself, you know, with everyone always coming to me like Lizzie's going to fix my problems. Lizzie's going to make it better. And it was because I had in my mindset that I was this like Wendy to the Lost was, I was like caring for everybody. And it wasn't until people said that to me that I was like, oh my gosh, I am literally creating this myself.
Yes, yes. While sometimes it can feel like this is the reality, I can do nothing about it, but yeah, still there's a part of you which is part of creating that reality. Yeah,
Yeah.
interesting.
So when you'd come across this new way of working, then Charlotte, how did you then go and introduce this to your team? What was, you know, what was the feedback from the team and how did you begin this journey?
Yeah. So I decided to hire two consultants to help us because I was also like, okay, I want something like this. I don't know how. Let's invite people who've seen more organizations that do it like that. So that really helped. And when I introduced it to my team, most of them were quite enthusiastic about it. Some also had bad experience probably with traditional management hierarchy. Some were also a bit like, but why? It's also nice that you decide everything, you know? Why should we change? So, in general, the feeling was like, oh, yeah, we can go for it. And a lot of people wanted more structure because people got crazy of the not structuredness that was there. So, already any step forward, people were happy with. And then, yeah, also the doubt. Like, I think more employees have it when the founder decides to switch to self organization, like, ooh, what does it mean? And who do I want that extra responsibility? So that, but I think the slow introduction helped so that we, and that like these management consultants, they didn't come with, okay, this is how you should do it, but they were more like giving us examples of, okay, we've seen this organization, Morningstar, does it like this. Okay, this organization's in the Netherlands does it like this. So we could get some inspiration and then we kind of made our own way. So it was really owned also by everyone.
And how did the team kind of, yeah, what was the, I suppose that initial kind of practice? Was there something that you sort of played with first and went, actually, let's like experiment with this first and let's see, use that as our kind of playground, as it were?
It's a good question. I should actually have figured, like, looked it up how we did it exactly. But I think a few starting points were that we started to divide roles and responsibilities within teams. Like, okay, let's divide at least who is responsible for what. We didn't even have such structure. Um, I think working with tensions came quite early. So we started to kind of figure out our own thing. At the same time, we started to read a lot. So we also read about holacracy. We didn't like implement holacracy one on one, but we took some inspiration from it. So the working with tensions in holacracy, both getting used to the fact that it's okay to raise your tensions, you know, that's, and I was actually, as a founder, I was really surprised because I was having this image of myself that I was this really kind girl who everybody felt super comfortable with, and everybody was always sharing what was on their mind. And then we started to introduce tensions and that people could share their tensions and the neutrality of the term tensions, like, okay, just the difference between the current situation and how it can possibly be. Um, and then I was really surprised with the amount of tensions that people came on the table I wasn't aware of. And I also shared with them, like, hey, but why do you share this only now? Why didn't you share this before? And then people would say, like, yeah, but I don't want to be this nagging, irritating person. So, of course, I would not share my tensions all the time. But when we actively started to invite them, it was so useful because we could just use them as fuel, like, okay, you have this tension. What can we do about? Can we turn this into an action? Is anything needed? So that was really inspirational for me. And also as a founder, really shattering my image of myself, where I thought everybody would always feel safe because I felt safe as a founder in my own company,
Yeah.
logically. Um, so that was really useful and inspirational for me. And also I think one of the practices we also introduced quite early was the more structured way of having meetings. So somebody comes up with a proposal, then everybody can ask clarifying questions, then there comes a round of reaction, then the person can amend the proposal. For me, when actually my colleagues came with this method of trying, and I was actually very skeptical of it because they're like, why would we need kind of rounds, and that's more complicated. Everybody can just share what's on their mind, right? That would work because I'm this really extrovert person who thinks while she's speaking. But by trying it and seeing my colleagues react to it, so then my colleagues said, it's really nice we speak one by one. It's really nice we do a round so we don't all talk through each other. It's really nice I have a moment I can think before I speak. I was realizing, hey, I now organize the company so it suits my preferences as this extrovert thinking while I'm talking person. But I think these practices coming from holacracy, coming from other ways of self-organization, they are more catering to the needs of all the people in the team. And by that, you can, of course, get more out of the team. So yeah, that
Yeah.
were a few things I really had to learn in the process.
It's so funny because it is such a like I'll never forget when I did holacracy training in Amsterdam, and there were so many moments where I mean I'm not kidding. I got to the airport after the week in Amsterdam, and my head, like my brain, felt like it was about to explode out of my body because I was just it ached from having to completely rethink about how we do things, and also to realize that actually yeah, there's a lot of me that I need to really look at and understand in terms of how we do these practices, because in my head I've always done things this way and this is how I believe I show up.
Mhm.
And then suddenly you're practicing something and you notice like your own little ticks or nudges where you're like, wow, I really wanted to do this or do that. And you start to have that felt experience in such a different way.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what why holacracy is a really useful practice to borrow from is, I think, because it caters like the needs of different people in one method. So both the introverts and the extroverts get their place in the holacracy process. They're not designed only for this kind of people, only for that kind of people, but they're actually designed for having a group of different people with different talents, with different ways of working, and getting the most out of all of them. And
Yeah.
that's I think what's when you do self-organization, what you should really look for, whatever method you, whatever way of working you are going to install in your company, it should cater to the needs of uh, the people with different kind of preferences, different kind of ways of working, not just to one group of people, because usually the more loud people get the most sad in a meeting, but that's not making most efficient use of the whole team. So how do you get the silent people to speak up and the loud people also still being able to share their wisdom?
Yeah. I really like where you mentioned as well, just previously, about how someone came to you with the suggestion of the decision making process. Because something we see so often when we're going through any kind of culture change is it's so top down and it's always like, this is how we're going to do things. Like it's not very co-creative or participative. And so, how, how did you kind of encourage that, I suppose, is what people will be thinking, because people listening to this will be thinking, well, I'd love my team to come up to me and be like, hey, we should try this. So what do you feel you kind of instigated in that initial phase to kind of enable people to feel like they could come and recommend things? What kind of stimulated that, do you think?
Yeah, I think this is a super interesting topic, and I'm very happy that you asked the question because I think this is one of the hardest things, right? Also, because also in the way you start self organization, if you do it so top down, it can get really in the way of adapting the self organization. So, um, and I think this thing called parent child dynamics, when I read about it in, I think I read about it in the book Holacracy for the first time, the dynamic that in the workplace you have the people who have the more formal power, the managers or the founders, whatever, getting this kind of parent role where they feel responsible, and then the other people getting in this more kind of child role of feeling like, hey, nobody's listening to me, oh, I need to ask for something before I can do something. When I read about it and I became aware of it, I also became aware of what's my part in it. So where am I keep on behaving as the parent instead of being as an equal person? So for example, one of the things I did when we were implementing self-organization, I was asking my colleagues, hey, can you also go out, check out other organizations that are doing self-organization, ask if you can join them for meeting and come back with what you learned. So actually, I think a position normally a founder would take, like, okay, I will start researching. Let your colleagues also do this part and let them get inspired and see like, hey, we can do this. So I think, and I think it's uh, like what I think because during this whole time, since I started becoming an entrepreneur, I also started this process of looking more inward. And I think
Mhm.
it's because before I could just follow the path, that was set out for me. There was not so much need for looking inward. But when I became an entrepreneur, suddenly the path was gone. And automatically, I think I intuitively felt, okay, then I have to look inside more for my compass. So then I started to doing more meditation, more yoga, but also really therapy, getting to know myself better, coaching. And I think this knowledge, this more self knowledge or more almost human knowledge you get because you get to know yourself better. And at the same time, you get to know all humans better because we have so many things in common, right? So I think this really helped me in, yeah, making these choices. So being aware, hey, if I do this whole process just top down, I will probably not get the same amount of ownership of the self organization process than if I let my colleagues also do parts of it. So yeah, for me, that kind of inner work was really helpful in the end implementing something so practical as self-organization.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah, you are singing my tune, Charlotte, because it's so it's like that's exactly where I started my journey many, many moons ago. It was all around my personal development, and I was realizing so much how, yeah, how actually the way you view yourself, the way you show up, your self-leadership essentially, has such a massive ripple effect. And if we can kind of encourage that also within those, our organizations of that self-leadership, it really has such a profound effect on how we show up with each other and the way we connect, the way we're able to, look at challenges that come across. So I feel like that is such a vital piece of the puzzle that doesn't really get spoken about. And yeah, you know, we see a lot of the time with founders and kind of, I suppose, entrepreneurship, it's quite glamorized to be like this heroic,
Hmm.
egoic, let's be honest, sometimes. That's what we see on social media. That's what is shoved down our throats of like, well, if you're to be a founder, if you're to be an entrepreneur, this is how you have to be. And
Exactly. Yeah.
it's so hard, the paradigm shift to go from, well, this is I'm being sold and told that I need to be as a founder. But actually the reality is we need to do that deep inner work.
Yeah. And it's really hard to resist. I also notice it's really easy because as an entrepreneur, people start to put you a little bit on a, I don't know how to say in English, on a statue or like,
Yeah, pedestal, like,
on a
yeah.
pedestal. And it's really hard to resist that because it's nice, right? For your ego. People go like, oh, but in the end, I also felt like it's not even reflecting reality, Like we put so much in these entrepreneurs, while I also felt, hey, the company is really run not by me, by us. And I always felt like my colleagues didn't get enough credit for all the work they did. So I tried things. I tried, for example, when I would be interviewed, I tried to say, oh, I want to do a co-interview with one of my colleagues or these things. But yeah, at the same time, it's hard because the whole world kind of projects things on you, expects things of you. So yeah, indeed.
So tell us about how you staged the course, because let's be honest, like you've said, you really made something that was unique. You like took from different practices and different ways of working to make something that was unique to your organization. But so many times we've heard about sort of failed self-management
Mhm.
ways of working, because it is different. We're needing to show up differently. So what really helped you like stay the course when things were getting a bit challenging?
Actually, I think it was super easy because I think it was paying off so much, the self organization. It was
Yeah.
working so well. So it was really easy to keep on trusting in something that works so well. Not that everything was only
Yeah.
Hosanna and everything went all right and our numbers were only going up. But I was seeing that actually, when there was a challenge, we would be able to deal with it so effectively and so human and so well. I would only get more and more trust in this self organization. Not that it's perfect, not at all. But I
Yeah.
don't believe there's a perfect method. So if you want a perfect method, you can keep on looking the rest of your life. You will not find it. So
Yeah.
this imperfect method of self organization, which we even like, because I think when I look back, I think holacracy is really nicely designed. With I would actually maybe implement holacracy more one on one than what we did, because there's just so much thought of in that method, and we figured it out, but I think we didn't figure it out perfectly. But still, I think, yeah, it you could really see it working well also in the difficult situations. Not that we always solved everything perfectly, but the way we dealt with it, I think, was very preferable in what I've seen in many other companies, like uh, much less human, much less smart, dealing with the challenges that come on the path. So, yeah, in that sense, I've never wavered the course because it was just so clear. It worked very well.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. Was there a particular practice that ever kind of came up, or you, I don't know, went to go and implement something and it felt a bit messier than expected, and you're like, oh, actually, this is, a bit more nuanced than we first thought.
Nice question. So yes, I definitely know something. So it's this thing with transparency that we realized, okay, and it was also told to us by the consultants that transparency is one of the things you need, because if you start to distribute this leadership, distribute the ownership for things, then people need to actually know what's going on in the company, because otherwise they cannot make smart decisions, right? They need to have all the information. And we started out by just, I think much of the information was already public, but maybe not our finance. So we started to make everything just open and transparent. And we really had to learn that being open and transparent is not the same as people actually understanding the stuff.
Yeah, yeah,
So, especially with the numbers, if you're not used to understanding them, it's not so easy to read them or to interpret them, or when there's one bad month, to understand that that's okay, that you can handle that as a company. When people look at it from the personal finance side, they go like, whoa, we lost 5,000 euros. This is really scary. And then as an entrepreneur, it's like, ah, yeah, it's normal. And it happens every summer. It's our normal summer. But you need to be able to explain that. So I think we learned a lot in being transparent and take a lot of care everybody understands all the numbers well, all the data well. And I was also inspired by, for example, Zappos, I think, which is of course a really big company, where they even give like these whole bookkeeping courses to their employees so they can understand this whole massive sheet of numbers that's there. So yeah, I think that's one of the things we really learned, where we just started and we figured out. And for example, another thing that we also learned, which was also messy then, uh, before, we're like, okay, so now we just self-organize, but we kind of forgot about the little subtle things that the manager also does. This kind of checking in with a person. Hey, how are you doing? Is it the work not too much? Is it okay? This kind of human caring. And because we were yeah, you could go to everybody. It was kind of more hard to go to someone. And then we decided to set up this mentor system. So every colleague had 2 other colleagues that were their mentor. You could give 5 people for preference who you would like as a mentor, and then we would make this puzzle. So some people were mentor, not everybody was a mentor. But it could be that I could be your mentor and you could be my mentor. But then you consciously, when there's something, or when you're struggling with something, or when you want to think about, hey, what we would be my next step within the company, you could go to your 2 mentors and discuss it with them. So that were things, for example, that in the beginning we didn't know were needed, but then attention came up. There comes this work with tension again. Hey, and then a new role was created and we were filling that role. So yeah, that are 2 examples, I think.
They're really good examples. And I always find it really interesting because I think every sort of company that I've spoken to or that I've worked with that's going through this journey, they all have their own area where they get into something and it feels a bit stickier than they realized. And they're like, okay, yeah, we really love this, but also this feels a bit harder than we expected.
Yeah.
And I think one of the most common ones that I've definitely heard from sort of companies and organizations is that, the growth and performance kind of situation, especially when there's no clear linear career ladder, and that kind of feels struggling for people because obviously we've coupled growth and pay increases, for example, so closely in
Yeah.
standardized organizations that really most people are just on a trajectory to be on a management career path, even though they might not even want to be a manager. They
Yeah.
might want to be something else. They might just want to be a specialist, or even maybe in the future they might want to switch roles completely and do something different. So we don't have that instead. So how did you kind of face that growth and enabling those pathways to come to life?
Yeah, I think that's a really hard one, and it's what you said. I also hear lots of other organizations struggle with this, and I think we've maybe also lost 1 or 2 people because they would be like, yeah, but at this other company there's this clear path where I can go every time to the next step, and I just like that. I just like to have the new title and the new status. So I think, to be honest, it's not something that we solved. It's how we dealt with it. Is that we were inspired by another company in Holland called VC, who have made their salary model totally transparent and also totally kind of um, not based on performance, but just based on the years that you work there. So you get to be skilled in kind of one of the 4 standard tracks based on the roles that you have. And then every year you grow a little bit in salary based on the philosophy that everybody tries to contribute their best, and that that you can actually decouple performance from pay based on the actually I think scientific knowledge that paying people more for tasks doesn't make them more motivated. Sometimes it even works
No.
contrary. So this
Yeah.
kind of trust that, hey, we give you every year we give you a little pay rise. Not crazy. We weren't a super rich company, but we made this kind of honest system inspired by how VC did it in the Netherlands. I think for us that worked well. Apart from maybe 1 or 2 people who looked for something else. Yeah, and I'm also inspired sometimes by how other organizations do it. That they do it with a lot of peer reviews, or I think there are many ways in which you can solve this. And at the same time, I think, yes, you will never have that same ego boosting career. That's just not how it works when you start working with
Yeah.
roles, and it's just a kind of different paradigm. So you cannot, yeah, you can
Yeah.
never get such a ego boosting status thing, I think, in a self-organized company.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yes. It's so funny because just get so attached to like job titles and position. And I wrote a blog about it recently because I said, even in our social culture, you know, people ask you at a dinner party, what do you do? And like
Yes.
they'll put you in some kind of mental hierarchy as to how important you are.
Yeah.
And everything about your job role and your job title ends up being linked to like how people treat you, what you get invited to, your career prospects. It's all so kind of interlinked in even our social circles.
Yes, yes, definitely. Yeah, so I think that's kind of one of the unsolvable parts of the self-organization. And indeed, yeah. Maybe I think at some point I proposed, based actually on this knowledge, I proposed that everybody in our company could get the title CEO. That we would, because I think that was just how I saw my colleagues, everybody
Yeah.
would take so much ownership. But then my colleagues said they were uncomfortable with it. But I said, you can put it on your CV. I think it's a very smart idea. So I think that's maybe one of the hacks you can do.
Yeah.
You can just give everybody this fancy title which they would like, which they can share with their friends. Because I think the nice thing about self-organization is that the roles become really descriptive.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can just give a random status title just for the fun of it.
I love that so much. Oh, Charlotte, I've enjoyed talking with you so much, but I really want to know, like, if someone's starting out on this journey, what are maybe like the top 3 things? What's the advice you would give to a founder starting out on this journey?
So I would definitely start by visiting other organizations who've already made a step in this direction. So go look who are the organizations you can find where you can join a session online, or you can spend a day at their company. So really see with your own eyes how it is. So that you also can make this decision if you want to step into self-organization based on real data, based on reality, not on some image that you have of self-organization. And then I think the other advice I would have is do some inner work. I don't care what kind of inner work, but something where you get to know yourself better. Can be coaching, can be therapy, can be yoga, can be meditation, can be going in nature a lot, whatever. Something that you get to know yourself better, because that's a tool you really need when you want to shift to a new way of working. I really like the book The New Way Needs Inner Work. I think the new work needs inner work. That's a book I've read. I forgot the name of the writer, but I think that really makes a lot of sense. And then I think the third advice I would have is don't expect it to be one implementation you will do in 3 months and then it's done and fixed. See it more as a kind of evolutionary process. So you start to experiment, something works, something doesn't work, learn from it. So adapting this kind of already almost this kind of experimentation mindset of trying something, really evaluating it, learning from it, trying again, learning from books, learning from others. I was really happy by hiring external consultants, helping us a little bit on the path. I think that can be also a really useful tool. Yeah, I think that's already lots of advice, but I think that's what I would give as an advice.
Oh, Charlotte, your energy and joy has been contagious on this podcast. So I hope that those listening to it are going to pick up some of that. Thank you so, so much for joining me today. It's been, yeah, so rich in wisdom and experience. So thank you.
Thank you for inviting me.
You've been listening to Make It Thrive, the Company Culture Podcast.